Hello, hello, hello! Welcome to not the Wheel and Chill show, actually, technically, even though it is Monday night. I stole our time slot for another first-time reader, fellow Wheel of Time veteran stream about the Dragon Reborn. So, very excited to be here. I personally just finished Rosamund Pike's audiobook version of the Dragon Reborn, so it's all pretty fresh. My cousin Annie, which she's over. Okay, I always get confused. Annie over here is a Wheel of Time first timer who also finished the Dragon Reborn and started by watching the show. The show is what finally made her decide to do the thing and read the books. So we've got a show first time reader. And then we have my cousin Ben, who is a Wheel of Time vet like myself. We talked about this in our last stream, but we kind of grew up reading the books at the same time. And even though I have probably a few more rereads under my belt, he's a huge Watt fan and is excited to be here, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So I asked a lot of you on my various social media platforms to submit questions. And I thank all of you who submitted them. I already added a lot of them to my sheet. But if you have questions throughout the stream, please feel free to ask them in the chat. And if they're appropriate for, what we're talking about at the time, I'll ask them then. I might save some for the end. I appreciate all input, and I'm sure they do too. So, we've got all kinds of experience levels here, and we're happy to answer your questions. I do have a bunch of prepared questions, though. So without further ado, Ben, have you been inspired to reread the series yet with this stream series that we've got going on?
Yeah, that's a great question. Just from our talks, our conversations about the show, and the first couple of books, I definitely want to reread them. It's obviously a big time commitment going into 14 books, but I'm right now wrapping up reading a couple other book trilogies. I'm finishing like 3 trilogies. I'm on the final book of all of them. So once I'm done with those, I want to start the reread. So I'm really looking forward to it, especially after just talking about these early books and kind of, remembering what happens and the things that are going on. I'm looking forward to it. So yes, I will be starting a reread here probably within the next month or two.
Amazing. So, real quick, what are the 3 trilogies that you're finishing? I know I already know one of them, but I think the audience will be interested to hear about that one at least.
Yeah, so I'm reading the first Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. I've never read them, so I'm on the Hero of Ages right now, about halfway through. So I'm reading that. I'm also reading the Thomas Cromwell trilogy by Hilary Mantel, which is an incredibly good historical fiction series. And then my third one is the His Dark Materials trilogy by Philip Pullman. The Golden Compass, those books. So I'm on the third book of that as well. So once I finish those 3 up, I'll be free and clear to restart the Wheel of Time.
Amazing. I actually read Pullman stuff for the first time, I want to say right before the pandemic. So yeah, it's a fun read that I somehow missed because it's like kind of children's books almost.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So, but it's a great, even for adults. Okay. So Annie, we haven't talked to you at all yet. So this is a show question immediately because this is, I believe this was submitted by somebody on social media. So, seeing as the showrunner of The Wheel of Time has said that season 2 would cover parts of books 2 and 3, and now you've finished book 3, do you feel totally ready, fully informed, like enough of a Wheel of Time expert to be able to go into season 2 on September 1st? You feel super confident?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think from day one or the first episode, I feel like I should know what's going on generally, and nothing should be a huge surprise. I mean, as we discussed, there are always going to be differences from the book to the show, but overall, I think the storyline and the main events and character development should be familiar to me, hopefully. If not, then I just get extra surprises, but also, hopefully by then I've finished book 4 and can, if they go a little past book 3, I should hopefully not be too confused once the show comes around.
It sounds like the plan is to have book 4 be just like season 3 equals book 4 almost. It sounds like they're trying to build everyone up in season 2 to like get them ready to like be really faithful to book 4. So we're all just crossing our fingers that that's true. So we'll see. We've got some people. Brother Zachariah is on Well of Ascension for the first time. Tyrion Tracrand says, "Huzzah, first Mistborn trilogy. I am too." So there you go. I told you they would be interested.
That's awesome. I'm in good company then. Yeah, I'm really enjoying it so far.
Awesome.
I can see why, after reading that, I can see why Brandon Sanderson was somebody that was tasked with completing the Wheel of Time. Like, just by reading this trilogy, I can see, like, yeah, he was a smart choice, and obviously the books are great, but it's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so one more intro question for both of you. And it also has to do with the show, and it sounds like Jason ML's wife just started watching the show to prep for season 2, so that's exciting. So, which book to show change? So this is kind of involving, book 1 also. But which book to show change did you like the most and the least? Or you can just pick, most or least if you can't think of both. Whoever can think of theirs first, just go ahead and shout it out.
Most, and I think I've talked about this before, but most for me was the backstory on Rand, like his mom, the Aiel woman on the mountain, on the slopes of Dragon Mount, like with Tam. That depiction I thought was really awesome. Yeah, because they mention it in the book, but it's not like fleshed out in this full imagery experience. I thought that was really cool. That was my favorite thing they did. I'll need a minute to think on my least.
Okay, Ben, jump to you.
Yeah, I think my favorite thing they did in the first season was showing the death of Stepin the Warder, and kind of the way that they portrayed that, because I don't think you really get that exclusive look like that in the books, at least not that early. So kind of just the way that they portray the bond between Aes Sedai and Warder, and then also just I think the emotion in that scene is really well done, and so I really liked seeing that in the first season. That was, to me, kind of a change that they don't do that in the books.
Okay. Well, I am glad you said that, honestly, because there are so many people that are like, episode 5 was a waste of an episode. That didn't happen. That never happens or whatever. And I always maintained, like, witnessing firsthand how powerful the bond between a Warder and an Aes Sedai is incredibly important. And I think it lays the foundation for things that happen later, which I'm not going to talk about because it's spoilery. Yeah. So do either of you have a least favorite book to show change?
Yeah. Mine, I thought of it. It's Perrin having a wife in the show, especially now in book 3 when you meet Zareen Faile. Like, you could see that like turning into something eventually, and it just kind of like, why did we need this thing to start with? I don't know how they're gonna use that to fuel his future relationship, I guess, with Faile. But
that is a popular choice for things that people didn't love from the show. Let's put it that way. Ben, what about you?
I was gonna say the same thing, so I'll try to find another one that I kind of don't like. I wish that they had done the scene at the end of the first book, just a little more true to the book.
Yeah.
They made some changes, and I still thought that it was pretty well done, but just kind of the way that they adjusted it, right? Doesn't Nynaeve die and gets like brought back to life or something?
They maintained she didn't actually die, but man, it looked like it, didn't it?
Yeah, and like she almost like burns herself out with the power kind of thing, and like so I don't know. I just kind of wish they had stayed a little bit more true to the book with that. But I'd say that's probably my least favorite, other than the obvious Perrin thing.
That is pretty obvious. I would say that's, even though I know the reason, like I understand why they did it, I'm still like, gosh, I wish something else would have been equally effective for that. Anyways, yeah, so no, I agree. Those are all good choices. Tyrion Tracrand, I see your question. Ask it at the end if I don't remember, okay? Because I think it'll be a good thing to ask at the end. Least favorite show change from Jason ML is missing Camelin and Rand falling from the wall. That was cute. The Elaine Rand meet cute was unfortunate that we lost that one as well. I agree. Hopefully they get another meet cute and it's just as cute. Fingers crossed. Okay, so let's see. Where are we? Okay, so we have the prologue. It's White Cloaks again for some reason. Ben, okay, so the White Cloaks are essentially talking about what happened in Falma. We get some misinformation. It was the Aes Sedai, whatever. Was this a fun prologue for you, Ben?
Yeah, we kind of talked about the prologues last time. I think Robert Jordan does a good job of using the prologues to kind of get a glimpse of the rest of the world outside of like your favorite characters, right? It's like you see, the Lord Captain Commander. You get to see, is it Jaichim Carradine? Is that his name?
Not sure the pronunciation, but yeah.
Close. It's not in the realm. But and you also, I think in the prologue is where you meet the one Madral that's like, or Murdral that's like he's like the mouth, isn't he? Like, don't you meet? Is it Shaidar Haran? Isn't that his name? I think you meet him in this prologue, if I remember correctly. But
yeah,
just the way that they kind of give you a glimpse into the overall world, and then also the way that Carradine's given like these very conflicting orders of like, do this and you die, do that and you die, and he's like, what? It's rocking a hard place. Like, what do I do? What am I supposed to do here?
Right. Actually, I don't know if they actually name him Shaidar Haran. They might, but now that you say that, like, that was totally him. And I didn't even think about it. But yeah, that was. The Murdral that shows up and gives Jachim Carradine his orders. So Annie, same prologue. We have Ordeath there inflicting his little mean whispers on the White Cloaks and Pedro Nile. He kind of points Nile towards the Two Rivers folks, Rand, Mat, and Perrin. They're insane dark friends. Everybody in the Two Rivers is a dark friend. Where do you think he's going with that?
He very clearly is trying to get the White Cloaks to go to Two Rivers. Like, I think it's an attempt at manipulation, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, very clear angle he's trying to play there. And trying to make a connection for the White Cloaks to see, like, the whole lot of them are evil. Like, everything from this place is evil. It's not just Rand. It's not just this one piece. It's the whole puzzle. Like, to knock out the Dark Friends, you got to get them all, and you got to essentially attack this city, I guess. But it's like, it's the Two Rivers. It's like a tiny farming community. But I guess White Cloaks just like to destroy tiny farming communities anyway, so he might be successful. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like the White Cloaks are so susceptible to just being like, oh my gosh, you're right, they're evil. Like with the tiniest hint about someone being a bad guy, they're like, oh, we got to get them, without ever thinking about it. And I think the perfect example of this is them with Perrin. Granted, Perrin has killed a few White Cloaks in his day, like, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, it's like the root of all evil, like Falma, everything is Perrin's fault. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like,
they don't even get it. You know what it reminds me of? The White Cloaks with the Dark Friend things remind me of, like, this is maybe going to be tough for some people, triggering, but when we were in coronavirus and somebody would cough in public and everybody, you just blanket assume they have corona, right? Like, and that was real, right? Like, there was a real fear of the virus, right? I think that's how White Cloaks are with Dark Friends. If there's like a hint of something just being slightly off, they're like Dark Friends immediately. All Dark Friends.
It's a Dark Friend.
There's no other explanation. Everything's a Dark Friend. And it's in the same way that at least me, in the height of my paranoia during COVID, was like, every cough means somebody is sick around and has coronavirus and I'm going to get sick, right?
Yeah.
That's what it reminds me of.
Shortly post coronavirus, like shortly after the height, like once things started opening up again, I went to the symphony for some reason, and somebody was like, they had like an asthma cough that just like kept coughing, and I literally was like, it's fine, like, don't panic. But yeah, no, that's the White Cloaks. Like, that's such a good way to put it. Okay, let's see. So back to the good part. Perrin, Moraine, Min, Rand, they're all like hiding away in some wilderness camp, kind of biding their time. To me, this was a bit of a slow start, but then it kind of kicks off and we get like attacked by all the people and whatever. But before that happens, we find out that Perrin is smelling people's emotions, which I think is a bit of an interesting skill. So he's also resisting reaching out to the wolves, which is a skill that we know he has now. So Ben, is Perrin's little repertoire of skills that you would like to have, particularly the emotion smelling situation? Like, is that something you wish you had?
I think it's really interesting. I can't think of a situation where that would not be useful, right? Like, I think it would always be beneficial to be able to like understand the emotions of everybody around you. So I definitely think that it would be something good to have, but I could see it becoming kind of kind of annoying, but also like making you change your perspective on people a lot, right? Like if every time you're around somebody, they're all like fearful and fretful and whatever, and like, but they're outwardly calm, you kind of know they're just always bluffing, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'd be the world's best poker player if I could do that. But yeah, I think that would definitely be interesting and super helpful. If you could do that, but and also just like being able to converse with wolves or any animal for that matter would be awesome. So
It would.
that one, that's a hard yes for me, right? It will allow me to speak with any animal, and I'm good. So both of his skills that are like kind of highlighted there, happily take either or both.
That's a you son of a bitch, I'm in.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, so Annie, Min sees the death of Leia, the Tinker Woman, if you recall.
Yeah.
After a couple of fake outs, it ends up happening exactly as Min foresaw. Is this a skill that you would want, the seeing auras thing?
No. I think it would be so sad because I feel like she sees bad things more often than good. Or like I feel like that's just such a violent thing to see about a person, that's all she knows about this woman is like, oh yeah, she's gonna die soon. Like,
Yeah.
how terrible and what a weight that would be. And knowing you can't do anything to stop it, no, I don't want it. I think it's important. I would want somebody else to have that skill maybe. Personally, I think it would be exhausting and a lot of like almost trauma that you would carry, anticipating these hardships that are going to befall people and not always knowing what they mean. Like when she looks at Perrin, same thing, where she's like, I don't know what it means, but here you go. Like,
Yeah.
This is what I see, like I think that'd be really confusing and difficult to have in your life, but valuable for the point of the story and valuable for the characters around her to know these things about themselves.
Yeah. It's kind of like would you want to know like the time and place of your death? Like, no.
Yeah.
No. I wouldn't.
No.
I don't, because if it's
No.
inevitable and you can't fix it, like, ooh.
Yeah.
I think along the lines of Min, you asked about the reread. I'm really looking forward to rereading Min's like auras that she sees around people within the story.
Yeah.
And like keeping track of them and like, oh, like, here's all the things she sees about Perrin, and then over the next 10 books, like picking them out, like, oh, that's what that meant, that's what this meant. I think that will be really cool.
Yeah.
From like a reader's perspective.
Yeah, I mean, keeping like Min definitely, but also Perrin and Egwene's dreaming sort of kicks off in this book, and they also have, things that you think are just dreams at this point, kind of, but seem like premonitions. Like some of the stuff that shows up in their dreams is also like, it's like, oh, did anybody notice? Like nobody knows what that means except me, kind of a thing. It's really satisfying. The rereads are great. Also, Light Blinded Fool wants to release a PSA that Dark Friends can be airborne, so everyone pay attention, watch out, like, careful, be careful. Okay, so Rand accidentally causes an earthquake, which ultimately lures the Shadow Spawn attack that we mentioned before. Perrin realizes it's happening because the wolves send him a strong message in his dreams, and he ends up going like full berserker wolfman mode, like trying to protect Leia, but then eventually she dies and then he just like loses it. Even Lan complimented him on his warrior abilities. After the fight, he finds out that Rand hadn't been able to do anything with the power in the battle. So Ben, Rand really seems to be going through some stuff, but we're not actually getting his perspective. We get Perrin's view of him from the outside. Why do you think Jordan might have done this, and does it work for you?
I think it's a smart way for Robert Jordan to give you insight into the way that other individuals see the Dragon Reborn, within this world. So he gives you the perspective from Perrin, who's known Rand all his life. They've been friends all their lives. And so you get to see kind of through Perrin's eyes, this is kind of what he sees and thinks about Rand. And he knows who Rand is. He knows kind of character and quality that Rand has. So to get his perspective and then to kind of just, assume or extrapolate that, basically everybody else is going to feel less comfortable around him, right? Like less safe, less, add whatever adjective you want, but like basically giving you what could probably be at this point the most positive view of the Dragon Reborn from anybody that is not directly like inside Rand's head, right? That isn't Rand himself.
Yeah.
So Aaron's going to kind of give him the benefit of the doubt or kind of look at him more favorably than almost everybody else in the world will. So I really like the way that Robert Jordan kind of does that, and really throughout this book, the way they don't focus on Rand. And I think it's kind of for that reason, right? You kind of get to see the effects of all the rest of the world essentially kind of seeing and accepting, this idea of somebody possibly being the Dragon Reborn and how they go about that. And Rand is kind of just like, kind of disappears. He kind of goes AWOL.
Yeah, totally. I have to mention, Wheel Uptime in the chat says, he may have accidentally caused an earthquake, but at least he didn't accidentally turn into a mountain. 1-0 Rand against Luce Theron. Okay,
Good
so
point.
Good. So that is such an interesting point, that the Dragon Reborn is the title of the book, and we're getting the least amount of Rand that we've gotten so far. Period. Annie, did you notice? Did you feel this absence? Did you like this?
Yeah, he felt very distant throughout most of the book. There was a lot of other people trying to guess what Rand was doing and kind of who he was. Honestly, it made me dislike Rand a little bit throughout the book. I was like, why don't I just know what's going on with Rand? And I was like getting impatient with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, like Ben said, it's a good way to explain it. And since this is called the Dragon Reborn, it really was a smart way to show that Rand is, in a lot of other people's eyes, just this figurehead and not Rand. He is the Dragon Reborn, and everything that comes with that and all the implications that affect other people.
Yeah.
Rather than it being about his own experience of being the Dragon Reborn, right? It's the effect on the whole world, not just him, that the story kind of revolves around.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. At the same time, I was like, Rand, what is going on with you? Like,
which actually makes you just like all the other characters in the book, right?
Yeah,
where is Rand?
exactly.
What's he doing? Is he crazy yet?
Yes, I was like, and do we die now? Like, we can't. It's only book 3. I know there are 14 of these, but like, Rand, like, yeah, it was disconcerting. I think in the right way, it made me uncomfortable about Rand, and kind of showed that he was not. Kind of reminds me of like in Chronicles of Narnia, when Beaver's talking about Aslan, he says he's not a tame lion. Like, you think it's like, oh, it's Rand, he's this cute farm town kid, he's gonna always be good, but it's like, no, we don't even know what's gonna happen with him yet, and I kind of like that.
Okay, well, I'm gonna piggyback right off of that and ask you also, Rand and his dreams and everybody else's dreams, because Rand's dreams were infecting their dreams, everything is pointing to Kalendor in the Stone of Tyr. So we've got a sword in a stone that this main character has to pull out in order to establish himself as the guy. So like, I'm not going to assume that you picked up this reference, but there's a sword in the stone reference there, and so did you pick it up, and do you like these little kind of real world Easter eggs that Jordan sprinkles honestly throughout the entire series?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes the series relatable for anybody, right? That imagery of pulling the sword from the stone, that's just like, we all get that. We know what that means. That's like a huge important moment, and the way it translates how important it is to like the Aiel and the other people there. Yeah. The same way they understand that imagery, we understand that imagery. Like, oh, this is a big deal. Whereas if it were a different set of images, it would be harder to connect to. So I think it's smart for him to use such a common image for somebody ascending to power and authority. While at the same time, I was like, yeah, we know what's going to happen. Like, I get this. This is it's kind of played out in my head already. I know how this is going to go. But in that way, I actually understood the importance of it as well. So it's kind of a both and of like, it's not as exciting because I knew what was going to happen, but it is still impactful in the way that I think he intended it to be.
Yeah, and I think it's like different enough, the vibe. Yeah. It's not like a stone, but it's like in a stone, like in the cover art, which is like directly above me. It's like floating there. But so Ben, since you've read the whole series, do you have a favorite real world tie-in? And if it's like spoilery, then we don't, like if it's past Dragon Reborn. Well, I mean, we've got.
Oh yeah, so I do. I actually have 2. So I have not read into or read about any of like Robert Jordan's motivations and what he's based characters on or things. So like it may just be like in my own head, right?
Yeah.
But like the first one, probably my favorite one is Matt's kind of similarities to the stories of Odin in Norse mythology. And I won't go into it any more than that because there are possibly spoilers there. But if you read the whole series and then you read the story or are familiar with the story of Odin within Norse mythology, there are a lot of parallels, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And really interesting to see. The other one that stands out to me, and this is one that may be a bit of a stretch, but like it's kind of the juxtaposition of, you know, basically Christianity. You've got like Jesus and the 12 apostles, and then you have the 13 forsaken, and it's like this group of like firm believers, all, you know, basically fanatical believers that are going out into the world to kind of convert a bunch of other people to their cause. And like, to me, there seems to be a lot of similarity there. Obviously there are opposites, but that's another one that, to me, whenever I read the series the first time, that will like seem to be glaringly obvious that is kind of, you know, you had like Jesus and the 12 apostles, you have like Ishmael and the 12 kind of lower forsaken, if you will, and like so that was one that also to me seems intentional. Maybe it was completely happenstance, but I found that to be pretty interesting as well.
Oh, that's cool. I feel compelled to plug Origins of the Wheel of Time by Michael Livingston. Annie, you cannot read that yet, but it's it actually has Robert Jordan's backstory as the first part, and it made me cry several times. And then like the glossary is just basically all of Robert Jordan's real world reference, like people's names and where he got the names from. Like, for example, there's a Forsaken called Grendel, and you know, Grendel is also like a mythological beast, and like there's so many different like tie-ins to real world mythology and like geography and all kinds of stuff. And reading all that after having read the books is just so fascinating. You would think that reading a glossary is not that fun, but it is fun. I loved it. I thought it was great. I actually took a bunch of notes, but I didn't want to spoil it, so I haven't posted any like TikToks about it yet. But man, it's worth a read for sure. And if you'll be at WatCon, anybody in the chat, Michael Livingston will be there, so you can get your book signed. But anyways, it's a great book. Highly recommended.
It's awesome.
Yeah,
I'll have to check that out.
It's really fun. Okay, so Ben, the first town the party chasing Rand comes across has signs of Taviran all over it. Marriages, like crazy, tons of weddings. This is kind of a general question, but I love the concept of Taviran because it takes like your normal plot armor for main protagonists, and gives it fun side effects like this. Plus it ties into the concept of the wheel and the pattern because they're manipulating the threads and, you know, the pattern is being shaped around them. So do you like the concept of Taviran, and who might you call a modern day Taviran or historical?
Oh, okay. I do really enjoy the idea of Taviran, right? This idea, I think it's kind of a fun, unique way to show that like Rand as well as the other Taviran there, they almost have this like magnetic pull around everybody around them within the pattern, right? I think something that's really interesting about them is that they kind of make things happen just by who they are, right?
Yeah.
Like things around them happen just because of who they are. And I think we all know people that are like that are, for whatever reason, they're very charismatic, and like it seems like the you know, the whenever they flip the coin, it always comes up heads kind of people, you know,
Yeah.
like, and the old like adage of you make your own luck. Like it seems like there are some people that just are born with luck, and like they're born with everything kind of, chips always kind of go their way.
Yeah.
So I really like that within the book. I think you're spot on with what you're saying about like the plot armor, right? Of like kind of the explanation of why these characters are able to do all the things they are. Modern day people, I think there are a couple that would certainly kind of fit that mold of somebody that kind of almost imposes their will on the world around them, right? So historically, I think you could point to a lot of like presidents or whoever, you know, who have what have you. I think of somebody like maybe like Thomas Jefferson, right? Like one of the most influential people to why the United States is the way that it is, right? The government and the laws and all that stuff. So like just the way that he basically helped pull so many like the founding fathers together to agree to establish this country that now we live in, you know, like 300 years later or whatever. So I think that's, you know, he would be probably a good example. Modern day, I think of people like, I think Elon Musk is a good example. So while he's pretty polarizing in who he is, right, and we don't need to go into the political discussion of right and wrong, but he's one of these people that like, you know, prior to like the Twitter recently, everything that he has gone and done, it's like, yeah, you can't like launch a rocket and then land it. And he's kind of like, well, like, watch me. I'm going to surround myself with people that all have this shared vision. I'm going to basically pull all this future together the way I want it to happen, and then it happens, right? Or
Yeah.
You can't build a electric car that's that's actually going to be able to be used as anything other than a second rate form of transportation. But he's like, no, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna find people and draw them in and pull them in, and we're gonna realize this vision. And so I think he's like, I am not I'm not gonna say I'm a Musk fan or anything, but I think he's a good example of somebody that, like, he's kind of made his reality, like what he wants to happen in a lot of things recently on a really big scale. I mean, like, global knows who Elon Musk is. So somebody like that, or maybe a more positive example would be somebody like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He's he's just one of those real guys that you just want him to win, and he kind of just always does. He's always funny and funny. He's like, so
True.
Stuff like that. So there are definitely some people that I think are examples of it.
I think Musk is a good example of how in the books ta'veren can, like, you're not born ta'veren. The pattern, like, makes you ta'veren, and you can become un-ta'veren. And so your little like hashtag blessed factor goes away, and I think we're seeing that with Musk right now. So Annie, do you think the concept of ta'veren adds to the story?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it explains the magnetism of the characters and why they're so important, but in a way that also allows for the random occurrences to be explained. Like, that's what I like about it, is that Rand isn't trying to cause an earthquake. He isn't trying to manipulate the pattern. He's just like, he realizes it kind of forces him into accepting his reality. Like, whether I accept this or not and embrace this, these things are going to keep happening around me. So I need to figure out who I am and what I'm doing so I can try to influence the pattern instead of it just going wild on me. It kind of seems like he needs, like, that uncontrollability of being ta'veren seems to help motivate him to accept what he needs to do in some ways that I think are, like, panic and fear driven, but do help him come to terms with who he is. And I have a modern day ta'veren that I think we can all agree it's Taylor Swift.
Oh, there we go. I totally agree.
Karma is her boyfriend. Okay, so
yeah, completely. I just saw Taylor Swift on Friday, and I can confirm. I could see the pattern warping around her, like pulling us all in. You hear the crowd chanting, and it's obvious. It just is obvious. We got some in the chat. We've got, let's see, Jack Black, obviously. MLK, Nelson Mandela, Kevin Bacon. So yeah,
obviously
good points. All good points. Okay, so Annie, we also meet Noam in this chapter, the guy who had been pretty much wolfified completely. He was not in his human mind, let's put it that way, because he had gone full wolf. Perrin seemed really troubled by this. But how did it make you feel as the reader?
To be frank, prior to meeting Gnome, I thought Perrin was freaking out too much about this whole wolf thing.
Yeah.
I thought he, like, I was like, this is cool. You can talk to wolves. You have all these extra abilities. This is super awesome. Why are you afraid of this? And then meeting Gnome kind of explains to me, like, Perrin, it's okay to be afraid of this. Like, this makes sense to me now.
Yeah.
And the fact that Perrin kind of already sensed that it was dangerous, I think is really telling, kind of, for his instincts maybe. But that was heartbreaking to see, and it made me curious to see, like, how is Perrin gonna resist that, or is he? Because Elias wasn't that way,
right,
when we met him. But it's like, what determines one way or the other? And it almost seems like Perrin's on his own battle then between, like, being of human or being wolf, in the same way that Rand keeps being tempted by the shadow, like, to which side are you going to go to?
Yeah.
I think that's, like, I think it explains why Perrin's kind of tormented by this new, what I always thought of as a gift.
Yeah, for sure. So Ben, I've got a Perrin question for you too. So he feels plagued by his connection with the wolves, even though obviously it would be awesome according to all of us. It's throwing him into the wolf dream more and more. Do you think his reaction to these changes in himself is reasonable? And having wanted these abilities for yourself, would you have behaved in the same way that he was behaving, giving all the information that he had?
I think Annie did a really good job of kind of describing that, right? Of the fear of going full wolf like Noam does. I think Perrin in this book, maybe more than any other, he's kind of going through this sort of cognitive dissonance of like he's trying to reconcile the two selves within him, right? The human self and then like the more bestial wolf self.
Yeah.
He's trying to figure out like how to like reconcile those together so that he doesn't just go all in on one, because they're both kind of part of who he is. So I think when I'm reading The Wheel of Time, I think that the dream world is pretty disorienting. Like, it's just, for whatever reason, like, when they're in the dream world, it's always a little bit disorienting to read about. So I have to imagine that, him being in there and, like, actually going to the dream world, the real world, and, like, this kind of, like, constant back and forth going from one to the other has got to be pretty disorienting. He's in many ways similar to Rand in that they're both kind of trying to figure out who they are.
Yeah.
Rand is so afraid of his abilities that he literally goes off by himself because he doesn't want to hurt anybody, because he's like, I have no idea how to control this. I don't know what I'm doing. So I think it's really similar to what Rand really is trying to do, and that's what Rand is trying to do on his way to the stone, is try to figure that out for himself. And like the internal struggles, you get to see Perrin's internal struggle in this book. And you don't really get to see that from Rand, but definitely think that him trying to reconcile the two after you meet Noam is definitely like something that you realize, no, he does have to do this. He can't just keep going the way things are. He's got to figure this out.
Yeah, it's understandable. Even though he's got cool powers, we understand the reluctance to fully embrace them. All right, yeah, I can see that, especially after meeting Noam. All right, so Annie, we meet back up with our girls outside of Tarvalin. Varen is escorting them. Matt is sick. They get waylaid, though, by some white cloaks. Once again, the white cloaks are ruining things. Varen tells the girls to let her do the talking, but Elaine tries to name drop her mom. And eventually, Egwene, out of a fear of being recaptured, snaps and scares them all off with the one power, essentially, like, erupting some dirt near their horses and having their horses run away. Varen was not happy about this, especially because Egwene, in the process of doing this, revealed that they had been in Falma, making the White Cloaks think that they're part of the witches that killed White Cloaks and all of that stuff. So anyways, it's a bit of a cluster. I love the sequence because I love seeing the White Cloaks put in their place ever. I do not like the White Cloaks at all. But did anything kind of stand out to you about it, or did you like it for any particular reasons, or dislike it for any particular reasons?
I liked it because I think what I liked about it was that it felt authentic to like what Egwene had gone through, and even like Elaine's own sense of self. Like, I can fix this. I'm Queen's daughter. Like, let me just smooth this out, everybody. And then Egwene, obviously still processing the trauma of what happened in book 2 to her. Like, she's not going to just immediately get over it and be okay with the idea of somebody else capturing her, and that's what she is afraid could happen, and she's clearly not comfortable with even the possibility of that.
Yeah.
Which I think is realistic. I think that's honest to where she is as a character.
Yeah.
And so I liked that, and I think also her showing her ability and like Nynaeve kind of jumping in, like everybody just kind of like, okay, we're doing this now. Like,
let's get them.
Very, like, they're all very clearly in it together. Those three women especially, they're like, well, if you go down, I'm going down too, I guess. And they just like full send for each other, which I think is a really good sign of a friendship between the three women and a closeness that I'm hoping continues. So I really liked that scene. I think it's valuable. It also shows, Varen, the adult in the situation, who's like, girls,
what
like bringing reason, but clearly didn't understand. Like, it's that kind of patronizing leadership of like, you young girls, why didn't you just, Egwene, why do you have this trauma? It's like, no, well, Varen, maybe the answer is not that. I don't know. Like, there's very clearly a lack of understanding for what each of them has gone through and what each of them is coming from. And Varen's just very like, nope, this is not how we behave, which I get. Like, training to be Aes Sedai, you probably have to put on some boundaries to your emotions, but at the moment it just felt kind of like Varen, you don't get it, Varen. You don't get it. Like,
Exactly.
But I think that's fair.
I mean, Egwene and Elaine were novices at the time. What can be expected? Also, Tyrion Tucran in the chat. Eggy shot first? Question mark. I think this time it's clear. I think Egwene definitely shot first. All right, so Ben, the Amerlin, once they get into Tar Valon finally, she dresses them down. She assesses a punishment that sounds terrible to me because I absolutely despise doing the dishes. And let's see. Despite them leaving being Leandrin's fault, which is so brutal. But let's see. Do you think this was the right thing to do, tasking Egwene and Nynaeve with hunting the Black Aja at their like low level of experience? And do you think Egwene and Nynaeve were right in looping Elaine in on this mission?
Yeah, I think that, so when they eventually leave the tower, I think they're accepted, right? Right. Either way, I think sending out anybody that's not a full sister out to hunt the Aja members that are full sisters. I think that's a bold move, but I think it comes down to kind of a combination of trust and strength, right? It's like, obviously the three of them have very high raw power, Nynaeve especially. So they're all strong enough to complete this task. And then the Amerlin, I think she kind of looks around and is like, I don't really know everybody that I can trust. Like, I don't know who I can trust. I don't know who I can task this with, but I feel confident that I can trust these three or these two, really. And then they bring in Elaine. So I think it's more about that, more about trust and strength than experience. She obviously values those two things more than experience.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, bringing Elaine in, again, it just goes back to that, right? Do you trust somebody to be the person that's, will have your back, that is not going to be a dark friend, and that you can count on and rely upon. And maybe this goes back a little bit to when Egwene attacks the White Cloaks a little bit ago, and everybody kind of just goes in. It's like, yeah, they got my back. Let's go do this.
They become each other's ride or dies, like, immediately.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's true. I guess 3 is better than 2, so it makes sense to me, honestly. Although it's like, Siuan not knowing who to trust makes a lot of sense, but still, it's like, gosh, they were so inexperienced. Like, they were so inexperienced. Like, oh gosh. So
it reminds me of the Dumbledore Harry Potter thing,
oh,
right? Where
yes.
Yeah.
He's like, you're 11. You're gonna kill Voldemort now. Like,
you good?
Sure.
Yeah, that's a good point. No, it's a good analogy. So speaking of a lack of experience, Annie, were you surprised that Egwene and Elaine were tapped to take their accepted test so soon? And speaking of their accepted test, were there any standout moments for you from Egwene's test? To me, when I was doing my reread, I had forgotten how Rand focused it was. All 3 phases had something to do with Rand. How did you like the tests?
Yeah, I think it made sense to me that they were tested to be accepted, just because Nynaeve, like, on day 1 kind of was thrown into it. So it's like, yeah, I mean, they're not as strong as Nynaeve or as old, but based on what they had gone through in that time that they'd left the tower, it made sense to me. I was really happy for Egwene, because then she wouldn't have to wear the novice gray, right? Accepteds wear white, I think.
Oh,
that
novices wear white too. I don't know what it was. I think there was like because I remember Egwene making the comment to herself like, "I'll never wear gray again." But
yes, yeah.
But it was like I think one of her only dresses, maybe whenever they were leaving again, was gray, and she was like, "I don't," So
then it's that.
It's a good mistake to make. I literally made that same mistake whenever we saw the accepted dresses like in promos for season 2. I was like, oh, they're white. This is weird, but it's like, no, they were always white. Like it's one of those memories that like infects you, even though.
Yeah, I don't know why I thought they were gray. Anyway, moving on.
Moving on.
But I think the test for Egwene's test, that they were all involving Rand, was surprising to me a little bit. But also at the same time, it like fits with the whole this book being called the Dragon Reborn, right? Like,
yeah, it does.
Well, he's the most important one. Like paralleling that against Nynaeve's like Lan was only in the last one, or like the village people were in one of them, and they were very different, distinct things
Yeah.
and people around her for Nynaeve's and Egwene's were very much like Rand, like in different phases and different forms.
Yeah.
But I did think it was interesting, the progression, the fact that like her last one wasn't her falling in love and having to say goodbye. Like Nynaeve's
Right.
her last one was like, I have this authority and I can't save this person that I basically left the Two Rivers to try to help and be a part of. Like, that's kind of what I'm doing here. I understand how important he is, and like that fear for her is greater than, like, for her is on the level of Nynaeve's desire to be with Rand or with Lan. So
yeah,
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I do think Egwene's were just like, they were just so brutal. I don't know, they all felt like really brutal to me. Not to mention, like, in the background there was the resonance going on because of the dream Terangrial in the room that she was trying to conceal. So that was a problem. Okay, we're gonna talk about Alana a little bit later, who was involved there, but Ben, we are introduced to the Gray Men in this book. I don't think we had met them yet.
Right.
Would you say this is your fave shadow spawn that we've seen so far? I know there's one standout type of shadow spawn that we haven't met yet, but other than that one, how do you feel about the Gray Men?
I like that the Gray Men kind of add a kind of an interesting layer of complexity. Most of the shadow spawn we see up to this point are kind of brute force, right? You have the Trollocs, you have the Madral that they just come at you, right? Like they're just gonna kick your door in and kill you. And the Gray Men are obviously much more subtle. So I think that's good. You don't just have like, basically Robert Jordan doesn't just take like 5 different skins and paint them all on the exact same monsters and just say like, well, this is a Gray Man, but it's basically just a Trolloc, you know, like he gives you some different things that the protagonists have to deal with. So I think that's it's a nice kind of addition to the stable of like shadow spawn and monsters. But my favorite, I think, ever since the opening scene in the first book, the opening chapter, not the prologue, has been the Murdral. I just think they're such an interesting villain to me. Like the cloaks that don't get affected by the wind, right? How they can like kind of step into and out of the shadows. How they're all just like incredibly like strong, incredibly fast, incredibly proficient with their weaponry. Like I think that's such a cool like enemy that you run into on like a regular basis, right? It very much gives me vibes like the Nazgul from the Lord of the Rings, but there's like thousands, tens of thousands of them, so they're all over the place, and that's got to be my favorite.
I totally understand that. Also, like, the element of sometimes they can like bond with the bands of Trollocs, and like if you take out the Murdral, the Trollocs go down. Like there's so many like little things about the Murdral that's like really super fascinating. And the Dragcar are kind of like Dementor vampires, and the Trollocs are just the big orcs. And then there's the Gray Men. So Annie, what's your favorite shadow spawn so far?
Yeah, I really like the Murdral. Like, they're terrible, but I the creation of the Murdral, like Ben said, they remind me of the Nazgul from Lord of the Rings, but also a little bit Dementory because they strike fear in your heart so much, like you can't move, or like that.
Yeah,
to me, it's kind of a marriage of the two, and Dementors are kind of described as like the unmoving, unchanging face, not faceless, but kind of faceless. Like I think that fits. The Gray Men, I think, is interesting because I don't really know how to picture them.
Exactly.
I just picture like a cartoon shape of a man with no face. Like it doesn't. I can't imagine how they're gonna depict them. And the only reference point I had for a Gray Man before that was the movie Gray Man with Ryan Gosling in it, and I'm obviously not gonna imagine them all as Ryan Gosling because that's just gonna destroy a lot of things in our world. But I think they're an interesting, like Ben said, they're much more subtle and much more understated.
Yeah.
And the idea that like you don't really notice them is terrifying because isn't there, correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't watched Doctor Who, but I think there's like the angels, the concrete angels are like
if you look away from them,
at them, they can move.
Yeah. That's kind of the menacing
for me.
Yeah, I totally. It is interesting to me because like the only way that they can really do the Gray Men in the show is to like cast very plain looking people, but like just an average looking person, whatever. But then also what's really going to be important is how people react to them, right? Because it's like you'll have to like just kind of go like have them not react to them in a way that doesn't make sense, right? So if there's people coming at you with like knives and you just kind of like look past them, the audience is gonna be like, what's going on? Like, what are they doing, you know? But it would be hard. It's gonna be hard. It's gonna be a weird challenge if they decide to incorporate gray men. Will F says the gray men remind me of the Silence from Doctor Who. That's not the angels. I don't remember the Silence. I don't know. But let us know what that is. Okay, so Siuan was really cagey about whether they were actually going to try to heal Matt, right? She didn't ever say, like, yeah, we're going to. They eventually did, though. Annie, did this affect your opinion of Siuan at all? Did you think there was really a chance that they weren't going to heal him?
I mean, in the scheme of, like, would Siuan maybe not do that as a person? Maybe, but in the scheme of the books, I'm like, come on, they can't get rid of Matt. Like,
yeah, okay.
We've built up so much to this moment of healing Matt right now that this is not, there's no way. So, I knew he was going to get healed.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of the way Siuan handled it, it very much solidified her position as, like, a political figure who's, like, balancing a lot of different things, and kind of the way Moiraine is very frank about, like, my goal is to defeat the Shadow, and if you are in the way of that, you are going to get defeated too, you know, like,
yeah.
Siuan's very much like, I have one goal here, and I have to decide if you are worth kind of deviating from that. Are you a deviation from that? Would you go against the ultimate battle that I'm trying to fight? I kind of feel her trying to stay honest with what she's trying to do, but also just kind of manipulative and kind of, like, messing with them a little bit. I feel like she's just kind of messing with it too, like, we might not, but like, showing him he's not actually that important to her, which I think is good for Matt, because he kind of thinks he's the most important person in the world sometimes. So it didn't make me dislike Siuan, because I kind of expected her to be more of that indifferent character. I didn't think she'd care a lot about Matt anyway, so it didn't necessarily surprise me.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So Ben, after
I think just to chime in on
Please.
that, I think Siuan might be considering, like, the implications of what healing him might do or what it might unleash, right? This idea that whatever evil is in him is contained within him right now, and they have no idea what it is. Like, they don't understand it, and like maybe that also brought about some hesitation.
Okay, no, that's fair. That makes sense. In my mind, I was like, she was just like, maybe I'll blow the horn. You know, like, the glory.
I mean, really, that should be the major hesitation. Is Matt Cawthon the one you want? The power of blowing the horn of Valyr? Like,
yeah, I think that was the calculation. Like, is this a real thing we want? We have to really, truly think about it. Like, it's like the trolley problem, honestly, where you're just like, well, I could let him die, which I'm not technically, you know, like, if I don't pull the lever, it's not my fault. Or I could pull the lever and heal him, but then also he's our horn blower, you know. So, it's I get that there was a moment, at least, of hesitation on her part, even though, you know, it didn't make me feel super warm and fuzzy toward her. So Matt gets healed. We finally get the real Matt back. Massive relief for me. Ben, was this a relief for you?
Absolutely. I mean, it's about time. You know, Kritter, that Matt is one of my favorite characters in the whole series.
Same.
I mean, he's like top 3 for me. I love Matt. So, you know, it's interesting looking at it just from, like, the first 3 books perspective, because when I think of Matt, I think of the 14-book Matt, right? I think of what he's done in the whole series, and up to this point, I don't really like Matt, right? He's been whiny and mopey and pouty and moody the whole, and you're just like, he's honestly, he's kind of awful. So now, you know, this is one of those, you know, like, kind of major turning points for Matt. Of this is when he changes from being that Matt to, you know, a different Matt, and his, you know, everybody's favorite mischief maker in the Wheel of Time is back, and he's like, his story arc, I touched on a little bit ago, is really interesting across the whole series. It's very unique. It's super entertaining. He does a lot of stuff, and so that's just like one of those pivotal points within his journey that it's kind of just a sigh of relief. It's like, okay, we put that behind us. Now we can get on with the good Matt, you know.
Yeah, he does so many like funny, silly things in this book alone, and it's like finally, it makes me so happy to have him back. Speaking of some of the things that Matt does in this book, Annie, Matt goes to the practice yard while he's healing. He challenges Gawain and Galad to a little bout, him with the quarterstaff, them with their swords. Do you like this scene? And were there any standout moments for you or anything that you took away from it?
I love this scene, and this has to be in the show.
Okay.
I honestly loved this scene. It's like one of those moments I remember, and I think I will remember. Like, when I think about the whole book, I'm like, that was kind of awesome. Like, it's a side point. Is it important to the plot? Probably not.
Doesn't
but, like,
matter.
It's an important thing, I think, for Matt, who, for me, at this point, I don't know 14-book Matt. I know 3-book Matt. And 2-book Matt was kind of a mess, like Ben said. And then he shows up and he beats these guys in a practice yard with a quarterstaff. I'm like, who are you? What are you doing? And I think it starts to reveal that Matt, even though he has this very cavalier attitude and is kind of a goofball, he's very proficient in some ways. And that he can actually be useful instead of being on a cot dragged around is important for me to see.
Snarling at people.
Yeah, and I also, that Galad guy, I feel really good that he got beat at something. He's on the surface really nice. I get it. He's fine. But like everything that everybody else has said about him, like Elaine's perspective on him and Mint, and everybody's just like, ugh. I love that he kind of gets beat.
I love that you love that.
I think that's important, and I think that that's just a good, like, the fact that they kept trying to talk him out of it. They're like, well, I don't, like, really, they were so overconfident in themselves, and Matt's usually the one who's overconfident, so I kind of love that flipped. That was awesome.
Okay. So, Ben, the quarterstaff scene, very iconic in the fandom. We talked last stream about how the Dark Friend Social, which is also a beloved scene in the fandom, you and I kind of agree that it's like, it's fine, but it's not, like, as good as the hype makes it out to be. Do you think the quarterstaff scene lives up to the hype?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I mean, this is like, this scene lives rent free in my head from the Wheel of Time. Like, I honestly, this is like a top 10, maybe even a top 5 scene for me. And it's so like, it seems so like benign, like it's not that big of a deal, but I just absolutely love the scene. And there's especially like a quote afterwards, like, Gawain and Galad are like laying around, like nursing their wounds, and like somebody talks to them, right, about like, I don't remember the exact story, but it's something about like the only time that some like great swordsman ever got defeated was by a farmer with a stick, like. Yep. And I hope they bring all that, like Andy said, I hope they bring all that into the show, because this is one of my favorite scenes of all. It's my favorite scene in this book, in this entire book, and it's one of my favorite scenes of the whole series. I love it.
Okay. I don't know if you know this, but there is so far something that you can watch that relates to this scene, and it's the Wheel of Time show has like Origins episodes as like bonus content on the app, and one of the bonus episodes is that story of the best swordsman in the world and like the farmer and whatever. So if you haven't seen that, you might want to check it out because it's pretty fabulous. Nice. I agree. I need the Matt scene in the show, whether it's exactly as described in the books or like just has the same vibes. Like if the vibes are there, then I'm fine. But I also very much please want that in the show somewhere. Please. Oh yeah, Two Rivers Badger. I love that Matt has to pull back from the killing blow. Like he gets so into it that he's like, what am I doing? Just kidding. Never mind. Yeah, that whole scene is just legendary. I love it.
It kind of feels like this also kind of feels to me like the real turning point of Matt, right? Like he gets healed from the dagger, but all that is him just kind of like standing up and not feeling crap anymore. But like this is the scene where he's like, okay, this guy's the real deal. He's gonna be a contributor now. He's not just gonna tag along. He's legit.
Yeah. Also, Hybrid Havoc. We're not hating on the Dark Friend Social. We're saying that it doesn't fully live up to the hype because it is a very, very hyped scene. That's all we're saying. Okay, it's a fine scene, but it is no Matt with the quarterstaff scene. Is all we're saying. Okay, so Annie, we get a little more Varen here. She's mentoring the girls. She gives Egwene the Twisted Stone ring. We get Shiriam, who helps with the Gray Man. She's kind of like guiding them through their accepted tests. Siuan obviously is around, and Alana blames herself for the issues with Egwene's test. What Aes Sedai in the Tower would you say is the most trustworthy for the girls at this point in time?
That's hard. I would say Shiriam.
Yeah.
But mostly because it's a process of elimination on the other two.
Okay.
Alana, I'm like, I don't really know you that much. And
Fair.
like your willingness to be punished over something that I don't think is your fault. It comes off a little too eager. And Varen is so much a Brown of like, I don't know if she really picks sides. She just wants to study everything. And I'm like, I don't know that that's a trustworthy person, So I think Shiriam, like, she does show care for the girls, even though she's like really hard on them as the novice master or whatever.
Mistress of novices, yeah.
That's it. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I think she, like, I see there's actual care there underneath the sternness, and that to me would just be heartbreaking if she's a dark friend, because I'm like, oh, you gotta, like, come on. It's like McGonagall. She's the McGonagall-y to me. You know?
You're so nice. What did you do? Yeah, like, I get it.
You're not, like, necessarily kind, but you're good to people, and that matters,
Yeah. For sure. Okay, that makes sense. Not even Siuan. Yeah. Is it because Siuan is so like cold that she would like throw them under the bus, kind of the Harry Potter Dumbledore situation?
I mean, it's kind of the thing with Matt where she's like calculative, and that's okay, but like she's very much like, we can get rid of that lane. Like I feel like she would be the person to be like, yeah, we can probably get rid of a lane. Okay,
you're dispensable.
Yeah, like she's doing the calculation in her head of who's essential all of the time. I feel like, and that's just her job as Amerlin. But
yeah.
No, I think Shiriam, I feel like she's solid. She feels like I said, the McGonagall to me.
Okay, nice. So this kind of like goes into a question that I wanted to ask you, Ben. Information in the Wheel of Time. Super interesting. We have communication issues throughout, but the characters get information from Ba'alzamon and Lanfear in this book, some of which seems to be true based on the information from Siuan, Shiriam, and Varen, who we just talked to, half the time speaking in riddles. And from all kinds of other sources. Jordan kind of leaves it to us to determine what to believe. Doesn't always confirm or refute things right away. Do you like this about the books and how we aren't always told the truth of things?
That's a good question. I think that, I like that he has this in there because I think it's a mirror of real life in many ways, right? I think that if you want to learn about like any current event that's going on in our life today, type it into Google and click the top 5 links, and they will all have a slightly or significantly different viewpoint about what happened and how and what its effects are, right?
Yeah.
And it's the determination of that stuff is kind of in the eye of the beholder. So I like that Jordan does that too here, because like he kind of puts you in the same situation as them, where you're like, I don't know what to believe. I don't know who's good. I don't know who's bad. And it kind of creates this like confusion for the reader where you're not like confident. It's not like the Lord of the Rings where you're like, Gandalf is a good guy, right?
Yeah.
A good guy. I know that, and there's no question about that. And it, so I think that that's really good. I like that he presents a lot of the information in that way. But I have to say, I do also like the occasional third-person omniscient view where, like, just tell me what's right and wrong occasionally, right? Like, you can get me, like, take me on this journey and kind of, like, drag me through the mud and all this stuff where I don't know what's right and what's wrong, what's up, what's down. But, like, occasionally I want to kind of reset and realign with, like, okay, I know, like, okay, that's who, the Dark Friend Social we were just talking about at Boars, right? It's like, okay, at some point I want to be realigned and be told, like, okay, that's who Boars is, right? I know who.
Yeah.
And then we can go off again, but it's like every once in a while, let's bring it back, because otherwise it can get really confusing.
Yeah.
And you don't feel satisfied with the information, the answers that you're getting, which I think Robert Jordan does a good job of that. But I like that he presents a lot of the information in this way.
Okay. Annie, is this frustrating, confusing, interesting, a cool method for a new reader? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I agree with Ben. I think it makes sense in terms of trying to make the reader a part of the story, right? We've talked a lot in this about how even the way he portrays Rand through the eyes of others in this book versus from Rand's own perspective, that's effective. That's an effective tool to making you feel like you are in this world with them. But it makes me mad. I just want to know
what is happening.
I know I get so, and I am so gullible. Like I am the first person to believe the best in people, and so when Lanfear's like telling Rand to trust her, I'm like, maybe you should. I mean, I hated her immediately, but I was like, but maybe she's not actually just maybe she's gonna be good now. Like I always fall for that stuff. Like I'm always just as gullible, if not more so, than the characters in the book. So, it's hard for me as somebody who's always rooting for everybody to be a good guy that I don't really know. I mean, like Balsamon, okay, yeah, bad guy, clearly. Dark,
right.
Like the Murdral, sure, but everybody else, I'm like, it's like the Saruman flip in Lord of the Rings, where you're like, I thought you were, like, like it's really a letdown when he almost convinces you someone's good. So I'm worried about that, especially with a lot of the Aes Sedai, because I feel like I'm flip-flopping on some of them, and I don't know. And if some of them end up being bad, I mean, it just is hard. So
fair enough.
Yeah.
Light Blighted Fool says, "Why is Rand killing those cute little doggies?" From The Great Hunt, obviously. They were so nice. Okay, so let's see. Speaking of people that we don't like, Elida has proven herself to be particularly abrasive still. She interrogates the girls in their room, tells Egwene to her face that she didn't want her to be raised to be accepted because she's a wilder, even though she was technically trained by an Aes Sedai, so it's like she's not a wilder. How are you feeling about Elida right now? Annie.
Me?
Yeah.
Hate her. I hate her.
Okay.
I think she is very self-righteous, very, I don't know, like, bigoted towards people who are wilders, I guess is the word that I want to use, but just very, like, she just thinks she's the best, and everyone else is an inconvenience in her life. She treats people like they're dirt, and I don't like people who treat people like they're dirt. Like, Siuan was calculating with Mat, but she wasn't like, you are dirt. She gave him time. Whereas Elida's like, all of you are an inconvenience on my time. How dare you exist in my presence? And I just don't like that. She just seems very conceited and rude, and I don't appreciate it.
Yeah.
So she does have a name though. I have to give her that. She's got one of those really cool long names. Her full name, like she's got those points going for her.
Elida Do Avri Royhan.
Yeah,
did I miss any of it?
It's like a long name. That's kind of cool.
I think it is a good name. I'll give her that. I'll give her that. Okay, so all signs are pointing to the Black Ajah going to Tyr in the sense that they're probably laying a trap. But before they go, the Wonder Girls, before they head off to Tyr, they go talk to Mat for a bit. So Ben, the girls got a piece of paper from Swan, 2 pieces of paper from Swan, that essentially said, the bearer of this is doing things under my orders, don't get in their way, whatever. It's like just do whatever you want with this piece of paper. Would you have given up this piece of paper to Mat just so he could take the letter to your mom? And also, do you think that perhaps this was maybe a little bit of Taviran on his part?
I think it's definitely, in my opinion, a waste of the get out of jail free card, right? She's like,
yeah,
that's kind of what this feels like. It's like they get a get out of jail free card and they give it to Mat to go say hi to Elaine's mom. But
yeah.
I definitely think you're spot on that. There's probably some Taviran stuff going on here. That's probably why that happens. I think it also kind of shows the transformation of some of the other characters around Mat, of their opinion of him, right? So he's no longer the group pariah, the worthless guy that's just complaining all the time. Now he's, Egwene especially, they trust him, they trust who he is, and they know that he's a person of character. And now that the dagger's kind of out of the picture, they're able to trust him again with important things. It was interesting that's why they decided to do that. Not something that I would have done, but
that's my piece of paper.
yeah, exactly. Well, and if I'm Mat, maybe that's part of what it was trusting Mat to see if he would actually use it, right? They get word that Mat's in prison or whatever. They're probably gonna know no, he pocketed that and was gonna use that for something else, and then he'd try to sneak in and so. No, I don't know. It was definitely an interesting choice on their part.
Okay, so speaking of Matt, I just love Matt in this book, but before he heads out, he goes on this raucous gambling extravaganza. He makes tons of money. His luck is off the charts, like in a really weird way. He's led on a deadly chase where somebody ends up dying. And then he stumbles into an inn randomly and finds Tom. Annie, like, how did you feel about this sequence?
Okay, so this is one of those sequences that I think if there wasn't this existence of Taviran, it would be like oh, come on, man. Like, no,
This is not real.
Way too unrealistic, even though obviously this is a fantasy book, so like reality, who cares? But
right.
It makes it more believable that there is this mechanism of the Taviran to kind of pull him around and take him where he needs to be. I love that Tom's back. I love Tom. We've talked about this. I mean, I know he's sad, but I love that he's back in the story.
Yeah.
Because I think he's phenomenal. And yeah, the whole like Matt winning at everything and then getting chased and almost killed. I'm like, that also fits for Matt, like he has this ability to be lucky and he just gambles with it. Like,
of course he does.
He uses it to get himself into situations that you're like, come on, Matt. Like, it took you how long, how many games to figure out this is what was happening? And then you're like, oh, I guess I should leave before people get mad, Like,
use your powers for good, Matt. What are you doing?
Exactly.
I love Matt so much. Another one of the boys, Ben. Perrin finally encounters the Aielman in the cage that Min prophesied. His reaction to Gaul's mistreatment made me fall in love with him even more, even though I was already in love. Do you think Perrin is too perfect?
Okay, stop. Are you kidding me? That's my question.
Or, speak about Perrin in the context of this. Or Matt. You can talk about Matt too if you want. But.
No, I think Perrin is one of those characters that I really like Perrin early on, especially in this book. I mean, Perrin is probably the most engaging character in this entire book, like start to finish, in my opinion. I think Perrin is a very good character that they follow, and he's got a really good sense of like right and wrong. He tries to act on what he thinks is right and good, right? And I think like most of the fan base, I enjoy Perrin early on. It's as things start getting on, I kind of looks down the road is where I kind of start to diverge from my liking of Perrin. So we're still on the same team at this point for Team Perrin. But yeah, in the absence of like Rand in this one, I think Perrin's a really good substitute of a character to follow along, and you kind of see the world through his eyes more in this one than maybe you did in some of the previous ones. So yeah, I really enjoyed this sequence. The whole sequence with Gaul in the cage, I think is really important to kind of showing Perrin's feelings again about kind of like what's right and what's wrong, and like even if you're going to do something that maybe is unpopular or that could be illegal, if it's right, you should still do it.
Yeah, lawful good. Perrin, I feel like is such a moral compass for the books. He's got his internal struggles, but it's almost like with Noam, right? He's like, we got to let this guy out of his cage. This is ridiculous, and then in the same way that they let Gaul out you shouldn't be throwing rocks at any prisoner, even if he's like a filthy Aielman or whatever you want to call him. So yeah, I think Perrin is so good in this. I disagree. I think Matt is my favorite perspective from this book, but Perrin is a really great one to follow also. Annie, I guess, what's your favorite perspective from the book?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think I really like Perrin, but I think Matt for me actually became interesting in this book, so yeah. I am going to pick him. Because before this book, he was just kind of a guy on a cot and grumpy and sad and useless. And like we didn't really hear from his perspective a lot. So I liked that. Yeah. Once he was healed, kind of hearing how he was going about things, even though he frustrates me to no end because he's chaotic good, right?
Yeah, Matt's chaotic good. Two Rivers Veteran's a good point. Perrin is neutral good.
Matt might be chaotic. He might be chaotic neutral because he just kind of does all kinds of stuff.
Accidentally does good things sometimes.
Yeah, he's not always good.
He doesn't intend. He's like the most selfish, self-focused person. He's like, well, I got to get out of this city. It's like, Matt, come on. There's a whole stake you're worried about you getting to do what you want right now? Like,
Of course you
Yeah.
are.
but
Okay.
it's entertaining.
It is. It is. So we have Perrin not only meets Gaul, but he also meets his falcon, Faile. I liked their progression throughout this book. I thought it was kind of fun, from the like, I'm not sure she's pretty, to like, maybe she's the most beautiful woman I've ever seen that Min warned me about. You know what I mean? Like, and like refusing to call her Faile, and then eventually like almost sacrificing himself to save her. They went on like this whole journey. Did you enjoy their interactions, and do you like Faile at this point?
Me?
Yeah, sorry, yeah. I
Yeah.
just thought I said your
Oh
name.
no, you're good. I appreciate Perrin. I just like Perrin as a character.
Okay.
So I like anything that involves him. I think Faile is frustrating to me. She's one of those like vexing people where you're like, do you like him? What's happening? Like I'm even like, what is going on here, Faile? Who are you? And who do you think you are getting mixed up in this Taviran business? But I do grow to really like her. And that's possibly because of Perrin's own portrayal, like through his eyes and how he sees her.
Yeah.
I see that and I'm like, okay, like she is kind of a good fit for, you know, mild, kind of slow-moving Perrin is this firecracker of a person who's just mouthy and kind of just does whatever she wants. I think there's like a good balance there.
Yeah.
And I love, I mean, it's Perrin, we see it, right, with him setting Gnome free, him setting Gaul free, and then with Faile, he sees her she's trapped. She's imprisoned, and he can't leave her there, right? I think that's like, it shows his tenderness that he has towards others and the amount of compassion he shows. So I like it.
Okay. Ben, are you a Faile stan?
I like Faile. Yeah, I think she's I think she's feisty little character, which is good because I tend to think that Perrin can be a little bit boring. And I mean, in the book, he's even portrayed as kind of being a little slow, like not like stupid, but like he thinks things through. He's a little more methodical. He's not so, and Faile's kind of just a little firecracker. So I think they're a good fit. I think they're a good pair.
I like her a lot. Everyone in the chat is also reminding the Mandarp situation where Faile is trying to come up with a new name, and she's like, I know, I'll be Mandarp. It means blade in the old tongue. And Perrin is like, that's the horse's name. Oh, that was so good. Iconic even. Heron Mark Blade on the Twitch chat said they initially made fun of her because of the Mandarp thing. And it's I love that scene. That's a funny one. The little moments of levity in the Wheel of Time are the things that like they just like those little brief like coming up for air and then going back down and there's more gray men or whatever. I think it makes it so much more readable, like having that kind of like diversity. Okay, so let's see. So Ben, in one of our few Rand chapters, he murders an entire party of people who requested to share his fire without any real sign that they were bad guys that we saw when we were reading it. Turns out maybe one of them might have been a gray man because he didn't have any armor and he had a dagger, but like that was after the fact. Do you think him killing them was premature or reasonable? Do you think there was something that we didn't see that Rand saw?
It definitely feels premature, right?
Okay.
It's kind of the classic question of like, does the end justify the means? It's like, well, I think that guy, now that he's dead, he might have been a gray man. It's like, well, I think he jumps the gun on this one.
Yeah.
And we were kind of talking about like he's going through a lot in this book. He's trying to figure out like who he is, and not just like who he is, but who the Dragon Reborn is, right? And he purposefully goes off on his own so that he doesn't hurt the people that he cares about, and so that he doesn't put them in danger. So like he's out by himself, and all these these people show up and say like, yeah, we're just gonna come sit around your fire and hang out and blah blah. And he's obviously wary, but maybe in his own mind that was the only way for him to get out of that situation. But I don't honestly like what he does in this scene. I think he does jump the gun, but that's one of the really interesting, really enjoyable things about this series is that Robert Jordan doesn't just give you a bunch of pure white characters and say, yeah, they're all super good guys and they always do the right thing, right? He gives you characters that are put in difficult situations and they make a decision and they move forward with it. And this is one of those for Rand, where he does, what he did. Maybe it was right, maybe it was wrong, but you got to move forward with it.
He did it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You don't just have characters that never mess up and never make mistakes. Like they do. He did have to do this, and he made the best decision he could with the information he had. So I can respect that, but not a big fan of this move by him.
Yeah, people are mentioning he wasn't sleeping very well. He was dealing with the one power. Yeah, I mean, like, it's not obviously completely on him, but it's still kind of problematic. And then Annie, after he kills all these people without any real warning or chance for them to escape, he uses the one power to make them kneel or like bow to him. Did this freak you out as much as it freaked me?
Yes. This is the moment where I'm like, and Rand has lost it. This is he's crazy now. Like, I was like, this is so absurd and like grotesque. Like, it's beyond just the murder, like the murdering of all these people, which shows he has the heightened fear sense that we talked about the White Cloaks having, right? He has that level of like, everybody's a dark friend, everybody's out to get me, right? But beyond that, after he kills them, he makes them bow to him. Like, why? Why would you? What is going on in your head, Rand? That this is, I mean, we see it, right? It's from his perspective, but it just feels really unhinged and really not okay. But like Ben said, he's not a pure white character. He's making mistakes. He's trying to figure out what it means to be the Dragon Reborn and like how to be this person that he doesn't really want to be. And you see him fighting with that, I think, in this scene a lot, that he's like, well, they should bow to me, kind of, like there's that kind of idea of him having a right to it, that I don't think he actually owns or is proud of in the end. But don't like it. It creeps me out.
It creeps me out. I think this is Jordan, like the earthquake earlier on, like this. I think Jordan is like, no, like he's not exempt from going mad just because he's the Dragon Reborn. So here are some really weird things that he's going to be doing that are going to be troubling for all of us. And so, I think it's useful, but also just like, I didn't want to see that from my sweet baby Rand from like book 1 and book 2. Like, he was nice and cute and innocent and like powerful, but like still really nice and cute and innocent. Let's keep that Rand. So Ben, the girls encounter some Maidens of the Spear on their way to Tyr. As an avid reader, do you think they brush a little too closely to other desert-dwelling cultures like the Fremen, or are you a fan of the Aiel, or both?
I really like the Aiel. That they are probably my favorite, like, I don't know what nationality would you call it, whatever.
I call them my favorite culture because they're also my favorite culture.
There it is. Like, I think the Aiel, and particularly the women, right? The shield, the Maidens of the Spear, and the Wise Ones, which that comes later, I think. But just the women within the Aiel, I think, are super interesting, and I think that they add a really interesting culture to Robert Jordan's book. Right? I think of what would the series be if the Aiel were not in it. What would it look like, and how that would completely change the tenor of what the story would be. So I love that they are brought in, basically this early, that you start to see who the Aiel are. You start to meet them and learn about them, learn about their culture and all that kind of stuff. I think that it is a very unique culture, and it's different enough from other cultures, popular cultures in other books, that I think it stands kind of on its own. I don't think it doesn't feel to me like it's a copycat or like it's based on anything else. Like it feels like its own thing to me.
I agree. Even if Robert Jordan read Dune and was like, oh, the Fremen are interesting, the fact that they like live in the desert, I feel like is the extent of the connection. I don't know.
Right. In Dune there's so much like technology differences and all this stuff that it's like, the Aiel feel very different. I never really even compared the two when I read those two.
Yeah.
I certainly could see why some people could or would, but to me they're clearly separate.
Yeah. So Annie, at this point, the Aiel, we've got first sisters, and they mention wise ones, and they're dreamers, and clans, and septs, and all that stuff. Like, what's your level of confusion? Is it about the same level as Egwene's level of confusion with the Aiel?
Yeah, I'm like level 10. I'm like, when I'm reading a series this long, I know eventually this is all going to make sense, and I also know that right now there's a 0% chance that it will make sense to me. So in my in my head, all those words just kind of like I just kind of read over them and don't actually take any of them in. It's like blah 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 blah. Like I have no idea what do I understand in this passage or this interaction. So yeah, no, I'm just kind of resigned to like, well, guess I'm gonna figure out the Aiels at some point, but it's not today. So
not this day.
Yeah.
I like how Egwene, well, first of all, Egwene, when she encounters them, she's not like, oh, these are just women. She's like, okay, like, who are these people? You know, these people are real threats. Like, I love the Wheel of Time for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is how the women are just as formidable and important as the men. And the maidens of the spear are a big part of that. Like, what my Wheel of Time tattoo's got the Aiel spear on it, partially because I just like really resonate with the maidens. One of my first gamer tags was Farderace Mai. Like, I just love the maidens.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember that gamer tag.
Yeah. And every now and then somebody would be like, oh, Wheel of Time. Heron Mark Blade, what's up? Thank you for the sub. So anyways, I'm getting aside from myself, but yes, I love the Aiel. Super happy we got to meet them. Can't wait to see them in the show. Avienda's been cast. Like, all the pictures I've seen are just like, yes. All right, so moving on. Ben, when Matt got the bundle of fireworks from Aludra, I'm trying to like, we're skipping some things because there's a lot of things that happen. But anyways, did you expect him to use them to such a great effect?
You know, you just had this feeling that when the fireworks get added, you're like, something's gonna happen with it. Like, you know that it's not just gonna be some small simple thing, especially that they go to Matt. You're like, yeah, some mischief's about to happen here. So, it kind of felt to me it was like a kid opening a present on Christmas morning. Like, it had that kind of feel to me, where it's like, yep, like he's just like so, you know, like you almost get this giddy feeling like this is gonna be hilarious. Whatever the three does of season is gonna be hilarious, and it absolutely delivers. You know, on that, you're like, yeah, Matt. I think Matt's even, if I remember correctly, he's like, well, man, I didn't mean for it to be that big.
I didn't think it would work that well.
Yeah, like, yikes, my bad. He like blows a hole in the side of the stone or something like. But it's a fun way for Robert Jordan to like put something like impactful and meaningful in the story. It's like, yeah, it actually does make sense to use fireworks and, you know, gunpowder or whatever, like to like use a bomb to blow your way in there. But it's like, of course he gives it to Matt, so there's still some like humor attached to it and stuff. So loved it. One of the best scenes, especially towards the end of the book. One of my favorite scenes.
I agree. I think, again, part of the reason that I love Matt throughout this whole thing is because it's satisfying from beginning to end. Like, he's got such a fun arc. Like, he does so many silly things throughout that it's just really, it's entertaining. Also, I guess I haven't said this yet, but if you're watching and you're enjoying what you're seeing, please like the stream. It really helps with the algorithm. Okay, so continuing on. Let's see. Where am I? So we got a bit ahead of ourselves. Matt ended up in Camelin at one point, finds out that Morgase's bow is wanting Elaine dead. We also find out that in Ilion there is a Samael, Forsaken, is in charge, and then we find out later that in Tyr we've got another Forsaken that's in charge. Are things getting more? Are you feeling things getting more dire in this book, Annie?
Yeah, I'm feeling the pressure. I'm definitely feeling the pressure.
Okay.
It does give a sense. It kind of justifies a little bit the White Cloak fear and Rand's fear. Like, these people are out here. Like, it's not just the Dark One to be afraid of. It is the Forsaken, and they are out here. And like, Gabriel, I think, right, is the name of Morgase's guy, and he's very clearly evil. And I'm like, what? How? First, I'm just like so confused by him. Yeah. But I think it seemed like it escalated quickly from like Rand facing the one bad guy. Mm-hmm. You know, or like there being one at a time, and they're introduced as like, this is the only bad guy he's going to talk about this book, and now it's like there are 3 or 4. I don't even know how many there are. You know, it seems like
everywhere.
It's growing exponentially, and you're like, how is Rand supposed to defend from all these different things? And then you also have the White Cloaks, and then I mean, last book was the Seanchan, and you're like, there are all these different forces conspiring against the success of Rand and these Ta'veren, and you get that sense as the number of like evil people seem to grow throughout. Mm-hmm. This book.
Yeah.
Yeah, Yeah, it was a little bit shocking to me. But it helped explain in my head like why when like earlier in the book when somebody said like Queen Morghese didn't care a lot about the White Tower. I think it was like when they were talking to the White Cloaks or something, that there was a sense of like Morghese had changed or something was different there.
Yeah.
When you meet Gabriel, it's like, ah, well, that sure, he's a terrible human, so of course. Yeah. So it definitely ramps up the sense of foreboding in the book, I think.
Yeah. Do you think Lanfear? Oh, yeah, Ben, go ahead, please.
Oh, I was just to tack onto that. I think it also this this kind of reveal gives me the impression of like Rand has wasted a lot of time in this book. It's kind of how you feel. It's like
Yeah.
you find out like, oh well, all of a sudden, you know, you find out about Samael, you find out about, is this where you find out about Balal, or that might be a little bit later, but like it's like all of a sudden you realize, you know, they aren't just like bad guys just out there in the ether. It's like, no, they're right here and they're in charge of stuff. Like they're big important figures, and all this while Rand has kind of been traipsing through the wilderness trying to figure himself out. And it's like maybe you need to get on this because these guys are taking over the whole world while you're like trying to figure out who you are. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to interject that.
Oh, it's a good point. Oh, somebody in the chat is asking, Annie, when do you think we're going to see any other lady Forsaken? Since the only one we've seen so far is Lanfear. Is she pulling her weight as like the only woman Forsaken so far, or are you good with the female representation in like the Black Aja and stuff?
I think she's pulling her weight just in the fact that she feels really close to Rand. Like Samael exists, he's out there, but he's not like going into Rand's dreams and trying to convince him and like seduce him. Like Lanfear is very like present in Rand's mind and even in his thoughts, and I think that that's really threatening.
Yeah.
But you've mentioned it before, but I think like the balance of men and women in the storyline, I feel like there have to be more female Forsaken, right? That's going to be a given because it's the way the story goes, right? There's a balance of all of that. But no, I wasn't like mad there weren't more women yet. I was
no,
like,
that's
okay.
fair. That's
Lanfear's
fair.
kind of holding her own here.
I mean,
and she's doing more than the men, in my opinion, at that point. So it was fine with me.
She's everywhere. I mean, she showed up in Matt's room in the White Tower. She's encountered Perrin in the World of Dreams. She's also spoken with the girls, like, in the White Tower. She's all over the place. I feel like, yeah, she's definitely, as far as, like, the circle of influence goes, she's the closest Forsaken to all the main characters at this point.
And there's that sense of like the fact that she gets so close to them, she lulls them into this sense of complacency of like maybe she's not as dangerous as you think because you've seen her and you've interacted with her and you've had conversations and maybe she's not evil. And that's like I talked about earlier, me being gullible. I'm like, well, maybe she's not that bad. Like
somebody earlier mentioned after you said that you were gullible, like Lucy's got a football she'd like you to kick.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I do it. I totally kick the football. We meet Juilin. We meet the wisdom that the girls end up staying with in Tyr while they're like trying to search for the Black Aja. The thief catcher. Do you like Juilin, Ben, or the wisdom? Like, do you like the vibe in Tyr? It feels like a whole different, like, I feel like the vibes are super different in Tyr than they are in all the other big cities that we've been to so far. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. There are a couple different. We talked a little bit about the Aiel a little bit ago. There's a couple different like areas and cultures that have kind of this unique feel to them, and Tyr is definitely one of those. You know, I think of like I think the border lands, or like the border countries, they all also are they're very unique. They kind of have their own culture. So I enjoy the kind of romp through Tyr that they have. I think it's I think it's a fun city. It's like. Yeah, I think isn't it like right on the water? So it's like it's like a coastal city, you know. For me personally, I very much get like when I close my eyes and think of Tyr, I think of like Sydney, the Sydney Opera House in Australia. For whatever reason, like I get that kind of vibe, but like obviously the stone instead of the Opera House, and that's just kind of the feel I get from it. So I really enjoy the end of this book and the unique kind of aspects and culture that Tyr has. Is a lot of fun.
Yeah. So Annie, I guess as a first-time reader, when people kept seeing a red-headed man out of the corner of their eye, were you thinking Rand or were you thinking Aiel? Like, You know what I mean? Because the Aiel were in tier. They were on the rooftops. They were like, they were casing the stone. But then we also knew that Rand was doing the same thing. Did you always think it was Rand, or did you assume it was the Aiel?
I think until when Lan said that there were Aiel about, then I was like, oh. But then I also was like, wait, but people say Rand looks like an Aiel, so maybe it is him. But then Lan knows what Rand looks like, and I don't think Rand is as sneaky as what they say the Aiel would be. So I started realizing, like, I think there might actually be Aiel here, but I don't know what that means for anything, so we're just gonna go with it.
Something's happening.
Yeah.
Oh, so I guess I'll ask this to both of you because I find it to be interesting. Somebody mentioned it earlier, kind of in the chat, how the Ta'veren have different kind of manifestations of their Ta'verenness, right? Whether Perrin's wolf brother abilities are related or not. He's got his like wolf brother stuff, his dreamer stuff. Rand's obviously got his dragon stuff. He's an insanely powerful Ta'veren, and then he's got the one power, but also that comes with madness. And finally, in book 3, we're getting Matt and his luck, right? This wild thing that he can almost always rely on, right? And like it just works out for him. So in tier, it manifests when he's looking for this random dude, and once he starts looking randomly, it works out immediately, and the guy ends up dying and he ends up escaping. So like, how do you feel about these different powers in the sense that like, which one would you want? I think I would want the luck, but I just because like it's better to be lucky than good. You've heard that, and I feel like in Matt's case, like absolutely true. But I don't know, Ben, do you have an opinion here?
Oh yeah, I'm with you. I mean, the luck thing is, Matt's is by far the most entertaining of them all. It's just, he's just like, yeah, I don't know what to do. I'm gonna just turn left 3 times and then right once, whatever. Whatever. I'll figure it out, and then it works out for him. Like he's such an entertaining character. The way that I think Kritter, you said the way his Ta'verenness kind of manifests itself out in the world to me by far the most entertaining and the most like lighthearted. So I really enjoy that. So I'd be with you. I think that's the one I would take. So Annie, you gotta come up with a different answer now.
It can be unanimous. It can. But what's your real answer?
It's luck. It's just the most fun. It makes life way more fun to be like, well, I don't even have to think about this. Let's just like flip a coin and see what happens. That's so fun. Are you kidding me? Like, sounds great.
I'm very like type A, and so I think like that would really affect my overall demeanor. You know, if I had the luck, I wouldn't have to like worry as much about stuff. And obviously, if not for the taint, it would be the one power for me, probably. Yeah. But the luck is also, it's still incredibly strong. It's not like an obvious choice, I don't think. If you have an opinion in the chat that is not luck, let us know, and let us know why. Because I just feel like luck is the one, personally. So the girls are looking for the Black Oddjaw. They find out that they're in the stone as guests of the High Lord Saemon, I think is what he's called, but it's like it's one of the Forsaken. And so like right whenever this is happening, they're like, we got to figure out a way into the stone. They end up getting captured by the Black Oddjaw. Once again, the girls get captured. And that kind of lends itself to like the girls get captured. Rand ends up in a fight. There are some similarities between the end of this book and like the other books, right? Did you find them to be different enough that you didn't think like, okay, this is like the exact same as the ending for all the other books? You know what I mean? Like, Annie, was this familiar to you? Or sorry, I'm trying to formulate a question that I got. I think it was on Instagram. I think it's a decent question because they have similar arcs, but were they different enough for you?
They are different, but at the same time, I am expecting a similar end of book 4, you know?
Yeah, okay.
As bad as that sounds, especially the Rand fighting thing. I feel like the pattern is going to be at the end of every book, Rand fights a Forsaken. Like, that's the order I'm expecting at this point. With the girls getting imprisoned again, I'm like, oh, so the girls girls might just actually be useless in the end of each of these. Like, they're not useless, but it feels like it, right? Like, this big moment's happening and they're trapped in a prison cell. And so it's like, to me, it was a little bit of a letdown because I'm like, at least in Falma, they were like, you know,
doing some work.
Yeah. And this time it's like, no, they're just actually trapped. But I did really like how, like, they talked about the dream world and Egwene going out and accidentally stilling this woman, like all of these things. I think that was really cool to see that side of their abilities and their awareness growing. But yeah, I was a little bit disappointed that, like, I don't know, it just set me up now for this pattern I'm expecting. Which I don't know if he's going to continue with or not, but I would like to see different things.
We'll see. Moraine, though, like, as far as women at the end of books, like, Moraine kind of slays.
Moraine gets in there. Moraine, yeah.
So,
Moraine's serious.
So I guess, like, speaking of the final arcs, we have Perrin chasing after Faile. We have Rand and his, like, great battle. You know, like, he's starting to fight one, and then he fights Ishamil or Balzaman instead. We have the girls getting trapped, using the world of dreams to, like, mess with the Black Aja, eventually getting rescued by Matt. We have Matt with the fireworks, eventually rescuing the girls, not getting any credit for it. And I think, and then Moraine rolls in and just yeets one of Forsaken out of existence, right? So, like, who was the MVP of the finale of the Dragon Reborn?
Ooh, I'll jump in there first.
Yeah.
So the MVP of the book to me is Matt, because of the scene where he duels Gawain and Galad, and that's
okay, yeah, sure.
I'm kidding. No, so at the very end, I think it's got to be, to me, the where Moraine comes in and kills the Forsaken. I think is, like, there's a lot of stuff happening. There's so many moving parts and moving pieces, but, like, to me, that's the big one where she just, obviously there's other big things that happen, but Moraine is, I've said this every time, she is my favorite character in the whole series, and this is, like, one of her shining moments. Moraine always delivers, and that is why she's such a great character. She always delivers. She always comes through. So I love the way that this one ends with Moraine. Absolutely love it.
Okay. I figured that would be your pick, which is why I asked it. but Annie, what about you? MVP? Like, just, it can be most valuable in the sense that, like, they did the most to further the light, or it can be most valuable in the sense that, like, you had the most fun reading them. Either way, totally understandable.
So I'm going to agree with Ben that in the final scene, if Moraine hadn't been there, it goes very differently, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, theoretically, the rest of that, like, if Matt hadn't freed the girls, might somebody have freed them later? Sure. Or, you know,
they could have freed
Fighting,
themselves.
like,
I think, eventually. But anyway, sorry, you keep going.
Right? Like, there's a sense of, like, sure, good job, Matt, but, like, what really matters here is that, like you said, Moraine yeeted Forsaken. That's a great thing. We celebrate that. But I think, in terms of MVP, I see it as Matt, and not just because he beat Gawain and Galad. That was important, though. Very important in the whole storyline. I think it's because he's becoming a contributing member instead of just a drain on the team. That's it. Like, the first two books, he was just there and did nothing, and now he's actually contributing and using, like you said, he has this power of luck on his side.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see how that continues to further the light, you know, the cause for good in this book, because the luck tends to favor not just him, but also, like, the good thing, the most needed thing for the light to succeed. So it's not just a pointless luck. It's not just his survival. It's for, like, for the good, like him finding the person he needed to and all this stuff. So I think he's going to be the MVP for me in this book, because he does random things. They're always aligning with what needs to happen next, and it's a good way of showing, like, his own personality and his own gifts or talents, if he has any.
Yeah.
They can be used in a way that's really important. So yeah, I'm gonna say he's my MVP of the book, just because I kind of hated Matt before this book. So the fact that I like him now is a big change.
It's a big change. I think I wasn't completely fair to Matt earlier when I said, like, he does good things, but half the time it's by accident. In this book, he did good things all on his own. He decided once he found out that there was a target on the girl's back, he was going to go to Tyr, him and Tom, and they were going to find them, and they were going to rescue them. Like, he made the decision to be a hero, like, even though he's, you know, no bloody hero. But so in this book, I keep saying this, and I feel like I can't say anybody except Matt, because I keep saying how much I love Matt in this book. And I think it's true. As far as entertainment value goes, it's Matt. As far as impact on the end, it's Moraine. And so it's kind of like it's a tough call. I think that I cannot wait to see Rosamund Pike do something like this in the show? Like, whatever, like, the first time, like, is she actually going to be, I'm trying to think. I guess technically, for some of the Forsaken died in the first book, but like, she was the first one to me that like literally snuffed out a Forsaken, just like, bye. You know what I mean? Get out of here. Yeah. We'll see you later. I like at the end of the series. Obviously, I'm not gonna say what the tally is, but at the end of the series, it's fun to be like, okay, who's got Forsaken under their belt? You know what I mean? And like, how did it happen and how awesome was it? And this is one of the ones where she literally, like, I'm just picturing it in my head. It's so cinematic, where she just strolls in and is like, no, or whatever it is she says, and then just like out, like, as I said, yeets him. Okay.
Very important.
Absolutely. Yeah. I changed my vote. That's the one. That's my vote.
Somebody, Wheel Up Time also puts Matt eating 3 chickens in one sitting into the Matt tally.
That was impressive. That was impressive.
Yeah. So I like the end of it. Rand obviously has a big, gigantic, crazy, hard to follow Forsaken battle, which we're used to by now. This was probably one of the more easy to follow Forsaken battles of the 3. But yeah, I feel like without Moraine, Rand just loses. So it was good. Okay, so speaking of the similarities between the 3 books, somebody I think on Instagram asked, let's rank the first 3 books, least favorite to most favorite, or vice versa, whatever. Like let's rank them, best to worst. And honestly, I was thinking about this for a long time today in the back of my mind, and it's a tough question. It's for me.
Yeah, I think it's really hard. To me, the worst, third place, is the Great Hunt of the 3. I think that's a clear one. But I think I saw on one of your socials, I saw this question earlier today, and I got me thinking about it. I have a list on like an Excel spreadsheet of like, this is what my ranking is.
Okay.
I have the next 2 are right next to each other, but I have the Dragon Reborn second, and then the Eye of the World as my favorite of these 3 so far.
Okay. Okay. Annie?
I think that those 2 are super close, though.
Yeah.
I think for me, I'm going to put the Great Hunt as number 3 as well.
Okay.
But I think I'm actually going to put Dragon Reborn as my favorite of the 3 so far, just because for me, it's like finally starting to click. Everything's kind of starting to make sense in this world of things that was kind of jumbled. And everything's starting to accelerate in a way that I found really engaging. Like, yeah, I think for me, this one has been the best so far.
Okay. I think, gosh, because like in my head, my instinct is to put the Great Hunt last. But then I'm also thinking like, but what about Nynaeve's accepted test? What about Egwene and the Shanshan and the sword fight and the battle in the sky and the horn blowing, and there's like so many things that happen.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think about the Eye of the World, and it's like, oh my god, Winter Night, you know what I mean? Like, and our introduction to the characters, and Rand and Matt on the road to Camelin, and like, and just, and meeting Tom, and so I think I know. I think my favorite is the Dragon Reborn. I finally get my Matt back. We were meeting the Aiel, like Gaul and Do You Like to Dance, Perrin and Ibarra. Like, there's so many. The quarterstaff scene, Egwene's accepted test, which is just devastating. We're meeting more of the Aes Sedai. Like, okay, yeah, I think, and then like Matt just throughout. Like Matt again, second favorite character in the entire series, and this is when he starts truly to be himself. So,
right,
probably that, and then probably the first book, mainly for nostalgia. But man, it's really close. And then I guess the Great Hunt. But it's so close. Light Blighted Fool says 2, 1, 3, but what order? What order? 2 is the best or the worst? Sith Guy says there's so much setup in 2. I think that's part of the it's 2 feels slower. It does feel slower.
Yeah. 2 has moments that are really impressive, but the book overall isn't as like enjoyable a read. It wasn't for me as 3 was. So
I think you're right.
Right.
Okay,
I
so
agree.
Tyrion Tercrand reminded me, thank you, of the question you asked earlier, although I had remembered it, but I didn't bring it up. Do you think we're going to get the Althor the dragon, like we got the King in the North in Game of Thrones? You know, are we gonna have the same vibe like in the show, or are we not gonna go there?
I think they got to have something like that. I mean, there's got to be every fantasy epic. You got to have some scene like that. So I think they would be doing him and the story a disservice if they didn't have a scene similar to that or like that. So I hope that they do. I hope to see one. So my vote is for yes.
Some kind of chant, whether it's in book 2 or not, or sorry, season 2 or not. Sometime I think. Because I could see it also being, like, accompanying, if they put Rand in the sky after the second one, because there's, like, the dragon banner involved. I don't know. Oh, I actually had another online question that is good, like a good, nice wrap-up question. So we kind of talked about this already, so if you can think of another one other than the quarterstaff scene, for both of you, what is the moment from book 3 that you think the show simply has to have? And I will caveat this, whether it be in season 2 or in a later season, because there's a lot of speculation that they're not going to get to the Stone of Tyr until after until some things that happen in the next book. Sorry. Until after what happens in book 4. So like at some point, what from book 3 has to show up in the show for you? Annie, do you have, or either of you, whatever works.
I need a minute. Ben, do you have yours ready?
Yeah, I got mine ready.
Okay, let's go.
So I think to me something that the show really needs to get right is Balefire. And obviously Moraine killing Bilal in this one with Balefire that's going to be an incredible scene. So like what I would say is basically the cover art for the book, just that whole scene. I think. But I think that they really need to do a very good job of showing Balefire what it is, introducing it, explaining why it's important, and then also having it be very distinct and different visually, audio, from a sound perspective, from visual perspective, from just like regular fire. Like they can't just do like they shoot a jet of fire out of their palms and that's what kills something. Like I think Balefire is going to be a big, like, honestly, like a big make or break thing for me. Like, that's going to, if they do Balefire wrong, really going to hurt my opinion of just the series as a whole. So I do think that that's something that they got to get right. So that's something I'm looking forward to seeing because I don't think we've seen that in the show yet. And maybe we have, and I just didn't recognize it or realize it. But that's mine.
Okay, that's an interesting one. It's the CGI. Hopefully it looks good. Like hopefully it's distinct enough. I think it. For me, the most important thing that is how it's going to affect the person that it hits, right? Like it can look like a beam of light or a flame, a white flame or whatever, but like once it hits the person, they need to like somehow convincingly wink out of existence. Like that's what I want to see, and that's going to be really tough.
I want to see like a color change, almost like a color change, where like their whole body goes like blue, black, white, red, whatever. Like, and then they just disappear.
They blip out.
And then like they're just gone. Like
I like that.
Something like that, you know, like the sound that goes along with it. I just think Balefire is something and we talked about this, Kritter, before the show even went on, of like they have to show the weaving and the way the power in a convincing way. They can't just like, it can't just be like, oh snap, and then this thing happens. Like they have to show that, and they do a really good job of that. I think in the first season of showing the power and the weaves and all that. I think it's really cool. So I hope I want them to do the same with Balefire. I want them to get it right. I'm
just like waiting for the sound that it makes to be like, oh, my lips are matted. I can't do it, but like a pop, like what a bubble bursting. Yeah, it didn't come through, but that's what I mean. It's like, boop. All right, Annie, what about you?
Okay, I think for me it's gonna be, so we have Matt's showing his development with the staff fight. That's happening. I've decided they have to do it.
Okay.
If Taylor Swift has taught us anything, it's give the fans what they want, right? So hopefully we get the quarterstaff scene. And Rand, like all of the craziness that happens with Rand, I think there are a million different ways to show him going back and forth towards madness. But I think Perrin, I want the gnome scene. Noam?
I don't know. I think it's pronounced in a lot of ways. But okay.
Well, whoever he is, the Wolfman, I think we need to see that just for it to make, like, that for me was a moment that his fear of his ability made sense to me, right? Like,
yeah.
It just clicked, and it helped explain his hesitancy a lot around using it and all of it. So I think we need to see that. It also shows Perrin even more as this guy who lawful good, right? He's like, you have to free this man. Like he's very stuck on like what's the right thing to do in this moment, in the same way that Matt's stuck on what am I gonna do for me in this moment, right? They're like,
yeah.
And I think that's it's an important thing to see for Perrin to make sense. I hope they include that.
Okay, I like it. I mean, I think the quarterstaff scene.
A gambling montage would be really good too.
Yeah,
Matt.
Oh gosh, yeah.
The night he's leaving Tarval, and I agree completely. Yeah, I think I'm like nervous this isn't going to be in it, and it's not going to ruin the show for me. But I think what would make the show just that much sweeter would be the Gaul scene, honestly. And we're gonna get a bunch of Perrin interacting with people in cages if that ends up being the case. But like I love Gaul. I don't think it's gonna happen in season 2, but if it does, I will die of happiness. But like when he frees him and Gaul's like I already said this before, but do you like to dance, Perrin Ibarra? I get like chills. I just love when that is said. I think it is so epic. And then they fight the White Cloaks and Gaul's like, respect, and then he leaves, you know what I mean? And then like I'm not gonna spoil anything, but like we see Gaul again, and it's just kind of a fun beginning for Gaul. And I want Gaul in the show, and I hope they have, even if it's not exactly the same, I want them to have a fun meet cute like they did in the book, personally. Two Rivers Badger agrees we need the gambling night. They set that up with Matt in episode 1. He lost, like in episode 1 of the show, he lost his gambling, and so like that could show a change in his fortunes. That's a good point. Let's see. The sound of balefire to me is the white noise ringing in your ears. I can see that too. Not, you mean not pop? I'm sorry, I can't get that out of my head now. That would be so silly. Okay, so those are all the questions that I have written down. I think I covered all the questions in the chat. So everybody, you'll have a couple more minutes to get any questions in that, you think would be appropriate or fun to answer. And until then, I will just ask you both if you have any kind of like overarching thoughts about the series so far, or about the Dragon Reborn itself, or about the show coming up, or literally, I always just kind of let people say whatever the heck is on their mind. So either of you can go first. It doesn't matter. And I'll just say in advance, I appreciate you both being here. This has been super fun once again. So, whatever.
Yes, this has been awesome. Thanks for having me back. I'm really looking forward to the next season. I'm very excited to see how they compress and condense 14 books into a manageable number of seasons. Because obviously, if they do. It takes them 2 years to do each season. Rosamund Pike's going to be like 100 years old. Like she's not that old. But you get like the characters are not going to be at the right ages at all by the time they're done with this thing. So they got to keep it realistic and manageable from that perspective. I really want to see. We were just talking about stuff we want to see. I want to see how they handle and manage the Forsaken. They didn't really do that much with the Forsaken in the first book. They didn't do it, or in the first season. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be interested to see if they remove the Forsaken, or like all of the Forsaken or most of the Forsaken, that's going to really change the whole dynamic of the story, I think. But yeah, this is the original trilogy, as I'm sure so many people know. Like I believe that Robert Jordan originally planned The Wheel of Time to be a trilogy. And then it turned into 14 books, obviously. But I want to say that this was supposed to be the end of like book 1 or book 2 was supposed to be this book, The Dragon Reborn. So I love the story up to this point. This is, I think some of the most enjoyable work that Robert Jordan's ever put down on paper. I think this kind of original trilogy is probably my favorite consecutive 3-book chunk in the whole series. I think it's fantastic. It's well written. It's well paced. So if there's anybody out there that has not read it, I highly recommend that you do, because they're an absolute delight to read. It's such a joy to read that. So that's all that I have to say.
Okay, I love that. Actually, Annie, before I let you give your final thoughts, we did get a question for you. Sith Guy asks, where does the series go from here? What at the end of book 3 are you expecting from book 4?
End of book 3. I don't know. See, I don't know how to pace well, I guess, because I'm like, all right, Raid, let's just kill everybody then. Like, let's go. I'm like ready for it to get serious. So I know that's not gonna happen. I like that they're together at the end of book 3. Those, I think, like, they're pretty well all in the same area in the stone. So I know they're gonna break apart again and separate, because the world is just too big for them to not, and that just breaks my heart. It makes me so sad, because I feel like every time they're apart, all they do is worry about each other, and then they get back together and all they do is fight, because they're like, you're different now. And so I know there's gonna have to be that. I'm expecting more Forsaken. I'm expecting new monsters and new things to encounter, maybe even some new cities, because I mean, we've gone to like 4-ish, maybe. I might have counted wrong. But I'm expecting a little bit of that. And like you said earlier, the little Ordeath gigging the White Cloaks about Two Rivers. I'm interested to see where that goes and what happens with that. Because I have a soft spot for the Two Rivers, because it feels like it's my home in the books too, because it's where they're all from and where the story begins. So yeah, I think there's a lot that's going to happen. You keep talking about the Aiel, so I'm excited to learn what all of those words meant that I read. That'll be good. Yeah, I think, and to see like the world more fully fleshed out, because I think that's going to happen, right? All those pieces of the different cultures and systems are going to start to make sense, and I'm excited to see how that happens.
Okay. Herod Mark Blade in the Twitch, this is very related, in the Twitch chat asks, are there any like points of interest that you want to see, like you want to go to, you want the characters to go to, or do you not know enough about like the map to really know what to say?
I'm gonna be honest, I don't know that much about the map, but I think anytime there's a map, the curiosity is always like, what's off the map for me?
Here we go.
That's where I'm like, wait, they show all these different pieces, and I'm like, what's there? What's in this spot? So that's, I think, what I'm interested in is. I have full confidence that they're going to fully explore the map, and that's going to be interesting, but I can't wait to see what's beyond the known world to the Two Rivers folk. That'll be interesting for me.
That is a fun answer to that question, actually. All right, so before I ask you for your final thoughts, because you've talked here for a minute, I want to give you a break. I will say, Ben, you mentioned like whether they're going to do Forsaken stuff in the show. I'm not sure if you know this, but Lanfear has an actress, and she is going to be in season 2. So we have a Lanfear.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They have the girl from Peaky Blinders.
That's right. Natasha O'Keefe is our Lanfear.
I think that's a very good casting. She does really good in Peaky Blinders, so I think that'll be good.
I've never actually seen her in anything, so looks wise, she's a stunning person. So like, yeah, I totally see it.
I think she will do well. I love Peaky Blinders, first of all.
Really?
So if they bring Tommy Shelby in, I'll be happy. But no, I think she's a really good. She's a great actress. She does a phenomenal job in that series. That's all I've seen her in, but she really does a good job. And when you close your eyes and you think of Lanfear, she does fit a lot of the features that in my mind's eye I see Lanfear looking like. So, yeah, I think she was a good choice.
Love it. Okay, Annie, final thoughts about anything.
Final thoughts. Thank you, first of all. Final thoughts. Thank you not just for getting me in on these streams, but for having the passion you do for the show and the books, because that's. You and Ben, both of you, the joy you get from it is kind of what inspired me to start watching the show and then reading the books. And I recommend it to anybody, because it's a really beautifully crafted world that I'm excited to get to learn more about. Like I look forward to reading more of these books and learning more about what happens and learning more about the characters. It kind of feels like, since it's such a long series and I'm feeling like I'm really getting to know the characters well, it's like those long TV series that you watch, like Friends that has a million series, or The Office, where you kind of just want to check in and see how people are doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that. There's a sense of familiarity and closeness to the characters that I think is rare in a lot of books that I've read. So, yeah, I recommend it to anybody. I'm excited to see what they do with season 2. Having now read the books before watching the season is going to be interesting for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, I love that, and I love that you love it. And it's a fun world, and I think part of the reason that people love rereads so much, like this is an unbelievably rereadable series, is the love of the characters. It does feel like coming home when you read the books again, and obviously you're not through them yet, but it's like you just want to keep going, you want to know more. And if, you know, there's only so many books, so the way to learn more is just to start over again, you know, because every single time you read them, there's something different, something stands out, you notice something that you didn't notice before, and it's part of the reason I love it so much, because it's so robust and just so well crafted and well thought out, and it's just an incredible story. Also, Wheel Up Time. Ben, he doesn't know if you're watching the chat, but he says that Cillian Murphy would make a great Forsaken, like Sitmail.
Oh yeah, absolutely he would. Yeah, Cillian Murphy for any of this. Just get him in there anywhere. I don't care. Give him any role. He's phenomenal.
Yeah, he's in Oppenheimer, right? Coming up. That's the guy.
Is.
Yeah. Okay.
That's Cillian Murphy.
Maybe we'll get him.
He's better in Peaky Blinders. I don't know how good he's going to be in Oppenheimer, but he's better in Peaky Blinders. That's how good he is in that.
Okay. Well, on that note, thank you all. DK Moon says brings it to tears seeing the Wild Love. I know. I literally had to like stare and not blink for that reason too. So Annie's kind words, that was really nice. And everyone's asking if we're going to do book 4, and I hope we will. If you guys are down, I'm down. I'm currently reading the Secret Project 3, but I'm almost done with it. The moment I get done with it, I will be jumping into Michael and Kate's book 4 audiobook. Obviously, my most recent reread has been all Rosamund Pike stuff, but because I've run out of Rosamund Pike books, I will be returning to Michael and Kate, who I absolutely adore, so I can't wait to get back to Shadow Rising with them. And yeah, so I imagine, a month from now, we'll definitely, hopefully do another stream before the show comes out. That should be pretty easy, because the show doesn't come out for... Oh, yes?
If I might, so I am going to start a reread, but I don't know what version to listen to. Audiobooks. I'm gonna listen to audiobooks. Who do you suggest?
Okay, so, as I said, I love Michael and Kate, but if you're going to read the whole series, because there are only 3 Rosamund Pike books, I would recommend reading the first 3 with Rosamund Pike, and then you'll have 11 more plus the prequel with Michael and Kate. So I think getting a taste of both is a good call. And Rosamund, she won an award. She slayed. And then Michael and Kate...
I've heard hers is incredible.
Yeah, and Michael and Kate are just classic. So, once you switch over from Rosamund to them, it'll be a tone shift, but it'll be great, because they're fabulous.
Awesome.
So, yeah, that's what I would do, personally.
Okay, great. That was it. Sorry to interrupt you.
You're good. You're good. So yeah, we're gonna get to Shadow Rising as soon as we can. It'll hopefully be probably another month like this was, if not a little later or a little sooner. You know how things are, schedules, whatever. Thank you all for being here in the chat. You were incredible. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for sending in your questions on social media. Annie and Ben, this is super fun. I love all your insights. I love the first time reader reactions, and I feel like talking with someone who's familiar with it like you are, Ben, is just super fun to get into the more theoretical, universe type questions. I love both perspectives that you bring, and I think you're doing a fabulous job, even though I know you're not professional YouTubers like I am, obviously. So anyways, thank you everyone. If you haven't liked the stream yet, please do. If you're not following, please follow. I'll have all of my links and stuff in the description of this video on YouTube. And if you're coming to WotCon, I will see you in a couple of days. So get hyped for that, and we'll see you sometime soon. Bye.